Here's how God heals the wounds of your childhood. Sometimes the deepest wounds in life are not the ones that appear on our skin, but the ones carried silently in our hearts. Childhood is supposed to be a time of innocence, safety, and growth, but for many people, it becomes a battlefield of pain, neglect, and unspoken sorrow. Those early years leave marks that continue to echo in adulthood. Insecurity, fear, mistrust, shame, or the feeling of never being enough. But let me tell you something today. God does not allow those wounds to define the rest of your life. There is a divine healing that can reach back to the very places where you were broken and restore what seemed impossible to restore. Before we continue, I invite you to pause for just a second. If you have ever felt that your childhood pain still influences your adult life, whether it's through your relationships, your self-image, or the way you handle struggles, make sure to subscribe and stay connected. Because what you are about to hear could be the turning point where healing begins. And I promise you this, you are not here by accident. This message has found you for a reason. The journey of healing childhood wounds is not only about remembering the pain, but about allowing God to step into that memory and bring light where there was once darkness. You see, the human heart often tries to forget or suppress the past. Some people bury their pain so deep that they convince themselves it no longer exists. But here is the truth. What is hidden is not healed. It's only when those places are brought before God that the process of restoration begins. Think about the child you once were. That child inside of you did not choose the environment they were born into. That child did not choose the words spoken over them, the absence of affection, or the weight of unrealistic expectations. That child may have been left alone, criticized, or ignored, and now as an adult you carry echoes of those experiences. The perfectionism, the fear of abandonment, the inability to trust, or the constant voice in your head that says, "You're not good enough." But listen closely. God sees that child. He sees the moments you cried in silence. He sees the times you felt invisible in your own home. And He says, "I have not forgotten you. Even if others did not protect you, even if others did not nurture you, I was always there and I can heal you now." Healing begins with acknowledging that those wounds exist. Many people never heal because they are afraid to confront their past. They think admitting the pain makes them weak. But in reality, admitting the pain is the first step towards strength. God cannot heal what you pretend doesn't exist. He cannot restore what you deny was ever broken. The courage to face your past opens the door for God's presence to walk into that room of memory and transform it completely. Now, this process is not about reliving the trauma. It is not about becoming a prisoner of the past. It is about allowing divine love to rewrite the meaning of those memories. What once symbolized rejection can, through God's healing, become the very place where you learn the power of unconditional love. What once represented abandonment can become the reason you discover that God never left you. What once symbolized shame can be transformed into a testimony of resilience and strength. And here's something important. Healing does not mean forgetting. It means the pain loses its power over you. The scar remains, but the wound is closed. You can look back without bleeding. You can remember without breaking. And when that happens, you know that God has touched the deepest part of your soul. God's way of healing is never rushed, but it is always intentional. Childhood wounds are delicate, like hidden fractures in the soul. And just like a physical bone that was never set properly, those old fractures can cause pain years later. But God, as the divine physician, knows exactly how to reach into those broken places and realign what has been bent, restore what was damaged, and breathe life where there was once only silence. One of the ways God begins healing is by bringing awareness. Often, the first sign that He is working in your life is when old patterns come to the surface. Suddenly, you may notice that you always choose the same type of relationship that ends in hurt, or that you react strongly to rejection, even in small situations. At first, it feels frustrating, but in truth, God is showing you the roots of the pain so that you can finally stop watering them. What feels like weakness is actually the doorway to transformation. Think about it like this. A child who was never truly affirmed may grow into an adult who constantly seeks approval. Every compliment becomes fuel. Every criticism becomes a wound. That cycle can go on for decades unless God steps in. When He begins to heal, He doesn't just silence the voice of insecurity. He replaces it with the unshakable truth of your worth. You begin to realize that your identity was never meant to rest on fragile human approval, but on the eternal assurance that you were created with purpose, value, and love. Another layer of God's healing is learning to grieve. Many people underestimate this step. Childhood wounds often involve losses: loss of safety, loss of innocence, loss of trust. These losses were never mourned because as children we did not have the tools to process them, so they remained buried. But God, in His compassion, sometimes brings tears back into your life as a form of cleansing. The crying you may feel as an adult is not weakness. It is the release of decades of locked-up sorrow. It is your soul finally letting go of the poison, so it can breathe again. And once that release begins, something else follows: forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is not about excusing what happened. It is not saying that the pain was acceptable. It is about choosing to no longer let the past control your present. Many people resist this step because they think forgiving means forgetting or reconciling. But God teaches us that forgiveness is not about the other person. It is about freeing yourself. It is about cutting the chains that tie you to the pain. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful medicines God uses to heal childhood wounds. Here's where the beauty lies. When you allow God to help you forgive, He fills the empty space left behind with peace. The bitterness fades, and in its place grows compassion, understanding, and even wisdom. Suddenly, you can look back at your childhood not as a curse, but as the soil where resilience, empathy, and spiritual depth were planted. And let me tell you this clearly: healing is not about erasing your story, it is about redeeming it. God does not rewrite your past, but He can rewrite the meaning of it. The very things that once made you feel broken can become the very things that give you strength to guide others. Your pain becomes your testimony, your scars become your wisdom, and your journey becomes the light that others follow out of their own darkness. So if you are watching this right now, I want you to pause and reflect. What part of your childhood still whispers pain into your life today? Do not run from it. Bring it into the light of God's presence. Healing does not begin in denial. It begins in surrender. And the moment you surrender, the process of transformation begins. And if this message is touching you so far, I encourage you again. Don't just watch in silence. Subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone else who may be carrying childhood wounds. You never know whose life might be changed just by hearing these words. Because healing multiplies when it is shared. One of the greatest wounds that often comes from childhood is the distortion of identity. As children, we learn who we are not only by what is said to us, but also by what is withheld from us. If you were constantly told you were not enough, you begin to live with an identity of insufficiency. If you were compared to others, you may carry the belief that your value only exists in competition. If love was conditional, you might grow into an adult who believes love must be earned through performance. But here is the truth. Identity built on pain is not identity at all. It is a mask. And God's healing touches this exact place. When He begins to restore you, He dismantles the false labels that were placed on your soul. Labels like failure, unwanted, weak, or invisible. These are not who you are. They are wounds disguised as identities. And as God heals, those labels fall off like old torn clothes, revealing the real you underneath, the one created with intention, dignity, and purpose. Part of God's healing is helping you rediscover your worth. You begin to realize that your value is not based on the mistakes of your parents, the cruelty of peers, or the silence of those who should have spoken. Your value was sealed before you were even born. Healing childhood wounds often feels like waking up from a long dream where you were convinced you were less than you are. And when you awaken, you see clearly, you are more than what was done to you. Another wound many carry from childhood is the loss of trust. If those who were supposed to protect you betrayed or neglected you, it becomes difficult to trust anyone else. You may walk through adulthood always waiting for abandonment, always guarding your heart against betrayal. And yet in doing so, you also block yourself from love. God heals this wound by teaching you trust again. Not blind trust in everyone, but deep trust in Him, and through Him, a healthier trust in others. He shows you that while people can fail, His presence will not. And from that unshakable anchor, you learn to take risks again, to open your heart slowly, and to allow genuine love to enter without fear. Healing also restores emotional safety. Many children grow up in environments where they did not feel safe, where anger, instability, or cold silence filled the air. As adults, these same people may struggle with anxiety, constant alertness, or difficulty relaxing. It's as if their nervous system is always prepared for danger. But when God heals, He brings rest. He teaches your heart that it no longer needs to live in survival mode. You are no longer that child trapped in uncertainty. You are safe now, and He reminds you of this until your body, mind, and soul begin to believe it. This restoration of safety is powerful. Suddenly, you notice you can breathe more deeply. You can sleep without the same nightmares. You can walk into relationships without expecting rejection. This shift does not happen overnight, but as God works within you, layer by layer, you feel your inner world transform from a battlefield into a sanctuary. And let me emphasize this: the healing of childhood wounds is not simply for your own benefit. It is also for the generations after you, because unhealed wounds are often passed down. A parent who was unloved may struggle to love their children properly. A person who was never listened to may find it hard to truly listen. But when you allow God to heal you, the cycle breaks. You no longer pass your pain to others. Instead, you pass peace, strength, and wisdom. You become the bridge where the story changes. Now, if you are resonating with these words, take a moment and remind yourself, my story is not finished, my pain is not permanent, and my wounds are not my identity. Say it out loud if you need to, because affirmations rooted in truth are a part of healing. And let me remind you, if you have not yet done so, to subscribe and join this community. You don't have to walk this journey alone. Here, you will find words that strengthen your soul and reminders that your healing is possible. When God heals childhood wounds, He does more than simply remove pain. He transforms it. What once felt like a heavy chain becomes a key. What once felt like a curse becomes a calling. And this transformation is one of the most beautiful proofs of His presence in your life. You see, pain has a strange way of either closing us off or opening us up. Left unhealed, it hardens the heart, creating bitterness and mistrust. But when God enters the story, pain softens into compassion. You begin to notice this shift in yourself. The very suffering that once isolated you now connects you to others. Suddenly, you can recognize hurt in someone else's eyes because you have known it yourself. You can extend kindness to a stranger because you remember the emptiness of feeling invisible. This is how God redeems pain. He uses it as a bridge. The wounds of your childhood do not disqualify you, they prepare you. They give you the language of empathy, the depth of understanding, and the authenticity that no textbook could ever teach. People are drawn to those who carry scars with dignity, because scars speak louder than words. They tell a story of survival, of overcoming, and of transformation. And here is the miracle. Your greatest wound can become your greatest gift. The abandonment you experience can turn into a ministry of presence, where you dedicate your life to never letting others feel alone. The rejection you faced can fuel a mission to affirm and uplift the broken. The silence you endured can inspire you to be a voice for those who cannot speak. In God's hands, nothing is wasted, not even the deepest childhood pain. But this transformation requires surrender. Many people want healing without surrender, but the truth is you cannot hold onto the wound and the healing at the same time. One has to be released. Surrendering to God means saying, I no longer let this pain define me. I place it in your hands, and I trust you to make something beautiful out of it. And let me tell you, He will. Because every time you release a wound to Him, He replaces it with something greater. You release bitterness, and He gives you peace. You release shame, and He clothes you in dignity. You release fear, and He fills you with courage. This is how the alchemy of divine healing works. What was once poison becomes medicine. What was once heavy becomes light. You may also notice that healing gives you a new kind of strength. Not the loud, aggressive strength the world admires, but a quiet, unshakable strength. The kind of strength that does not need to prove itself. The kind of strength that has walked through the fire and knows it can survive. The kind of strength that carries peace in chaos and hope in despair. This strength becomes your anchor, and others will see it in you even if you never speak about your past. And here is something crucial. Healing does not erase vulnerability, but it transforms it. You can still be sensitive but no longer fragile. You can still feel deeply but not be destroyed by your feelings. God teaches you how to carry your heart in strength, how to live with openness without being broken every time. This balance, this maturity is the fruit of divine healing. I want you to understand that your story, no matter how painful, can inspire someone else's healing. Perhaps you don't see it yet, but there will be a moment when your scars speak louder than your silence. Someone will look at you and think, if they survived, maybe I can too. If they found healing, maybe there is hope for me as well. That is the power of transformation. Your life becomes a living testimony of God's grace. And let me pause here to remind you once again, healing is not meant to be a solitary journey. If these words are resonating with you, don't carry them alone. Subscribe, share this message, and let it be a spark for someone else. You never know how far your act of sharing could reach. Sometimes the right words arrive at the right time and save a life. You can be the reason someone else discovers healing. When healing begins to take root, you start to feel something you may not have experienced in years: freedom. Childhood wounds often keep people trapped in invisible cages. Some live inside cages of fear, afraid to take risks because every failure reminds them of past rejection. Others live in cages of perfectionism, always striving, never resting, because somewhere inside they believe they must earn love. And some live in cages of silence, afraid to speak, afraid to be seen, because being invisible felt safer than being hurt. But when God heals you, those cages begin to break. One by one, the bars fall away. Suddenly, you find yourself breathing more easily. You laugh without guilt. You rest without anxiety. You speak without fear of judgment. That is freedom. Not the kind of freedom that comes from ignoring your past, but the freedom that comes from being released from its control. This freedom is not shallow, it is spiritual. It is the rebirth of your soul into the person you were always meant to be. Healing childhood wounds is like meeting yourself for the very first time, without the chains of pain, without the masks of survival. You discover that underneath the layers of hurt, you are radiant, capable, and strong. You realize that your story has been shaped by pain but is not defined by it. One of the signs that God is healing you is when you stop repeating old cycles. You no longer seek the same toxic relationships. You no longer replay the same self-destructive patterns. The wounds that once controlled your decisions lose their grip. Instead of reacting out of fear, you begin to act out of wisdom. Instead of chasing validation, you rest in your worth. Instead of clinging to what is unhealthy, you choose what nurtures your soul. This is freedom in action. And with this freedom comes a sense of peace. The same memories that once haunted you no longer have power. They exist, but they no longer define the atmosphere of your life. It's like a storm has passed, and for the first time you can hear silence without fear. Peace is one of the clearest signs of God's healing. It settles into your spirit like a calm river, reminding you that you are no longer fighting alone. This rebirth also awakens creativity. When you are no longer weighed down by pain, you find new energy to create, to dream, to explore. Many people discover gifts they never knew they had after healing. Some begin writing, others start helping communities, others finally pursue the passions they abandoned long ago. Pain drains creativity, but healing releases it. And when God heals you, He not only restores your peace, He reignites your purpose. And perhaps the most profound part of this rebirth is the ability to love. When you were wounded as a child, love may have felt dangerous, conditional, or absent. But healed love is different. It is generous, fearless, and overflowing. You realize you no longer love from a place of emptiness, but from a place of fullness. You no longer cling to others to fill your void. You share love because your heart is whole. That is a miracle in itself. My friend, this is what healing looks like. Not perfection, but transformation. Not erasing your past, but being reborn in spite of it. The child within you is no longer hidden, silenced, or broken. That child is embraced, nurtured, and integrated into who you are today. And when you finally hold that inner child with compassion, you realize that you are free. So if you are listening to this and you long for that freedom, take this as your invitation. God is not only willing to heal you, He is already working in your life. The very fact that you are here, hearing these words, means the process has already begun. Do not resist it. Do not postpone it. Open your heart and let healing flow in. And let me remind you once more, healing is not something to keep to yourself. If this message is stirring something within you, subscribe, share, and comment. Let us know where you are in your journey, because your words might be exactly what Someone else needs to read to take their first step toward healing. One of the clearest signs that God has been healing your childhood wounds is the change you begin to see in everyday life. Healing is not just an internal feeling. It shows up in how you treat yourself, how you interact with others, and how you navigate the world. For many, relationships are the mirror where old wounds first appear. If you grew up feeling unworthy of love, you may have chosen partners who confirmed that belief. People who treated you with indifference, neglect, or even cruelty. But once healing begins, something shifts. You no longer tolerate what diminishes you. You no longer chase those who ignore you. Instead, you start to attract healthier relationships because you carry yourself with dignity and self-respect. You realize that love is not supposed to feel like survival. It is supposed to feel like safety. This transformation also shows up in your boundaries. As a child, maybe your boundaries were crossed again and again. Perhaps you learned that your no didn't matter, that your feelings were dismissed, or that your needs were always secondary. But when God heals you, you rediscover the sacredness of your yes and your no. You understand that saying no is not selfish. It is self-preservation. You learn to protect your peace without guilt. And this boundary setting is one of the strongest indicators that the wound is no longer controlling you. Another way healing manifests is in your decisions. People who carry childhood pain often make choices from fear. Fear of failure, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. But when you are healed, your choices come from a place of faith and confidence. You stop asking what will go wrong if I try, and you start asking what good might happen if I step forward. Your decisions are no longer driven by avoidance, but by vision. And that shift changes everything about the direction of your life. Even your self-talk transforms. The voice in your head that once repeated the words of your childhood critics begins to quiet down. In its place, you hear a gentler, truer voice. Instead of, "You'll never be enough," you start to hear, "You are growing every day." Instead of, "You are weak," you begin to hear, "You are resilient." This inner dialogue is not just positive thinking. It is the echo of healing. It is God's truth slowly replacing the lies you once believed. And perhaps one of the most beautiful fruits of healing is the way you treat yourself with kindness. For years you may have carried shame, punishing yourself for mistakes, blaming yourself for things that were never your fault. But as healing takes root, you begin to extend compassion to yourself. You look in the mirror and no longer see the broken child. You see a survivor, a fighter, a soul who made it through. And in that moment, you begin to honor yourself, not for being perfect, but for being courageous enough to heal. Everyday life also becomes lighter. Small things that once triggered deep pain, like being left out of a conversation or facing criticism, no longer shake you in the same way. Of course, you still feel them, because healing does not erase humanity, but they no longer define your worth. You can move forward without spiraling. You can let go without bitterness. You can stand firm without fear, and others will notice. They may not know your story, but they will sense your strength. They will see the way you carry yourself, with calmness, with confidence, with quiet assurance. And some will even ask you, "How did you become so strong?" That's when you realize, healing is not just for you. It is a testimony written into your very presence. But let me remind you, healing is a process, not a destination. You may still have days where old wounds try to whisper again. The difference is you now have the tools to silence them. You no longer believe every negative thought that comes into your mind. You stand in truth, and the truth protects you. If this part resonates with you, take a deep breath and remind yourself, I am not my past. I am not my wounds. I am the healed version God is shaping me into. And remember, don't walk this journey alone. Subscribe, share, and comment where you are in your process. Let's walk this healing journey together, one step at a time. One of the most profound shifts that happens when God heals the wounds of your childhood is the birth of gratitude. For so long, your story may have felt like a burden, a curse you wished you could erase. But when healing comes, you begin to look back with new eyes. You no longer see only pain. You begin to see lessons, growth, and the invisible ways you were carried through the storm. Gratitude does not deny the suffering. It transforms how you hold it. You begin to say, I went through darkness, but it made me compassionate. I was broken, but it taught me resilience. I was silenced, but it gave me the wisdom to value every voice. Gratitude reframes your story so that what once felt like wasted years now feels like a sacred journey. And this gratitude is not shallow. It is deep, lasting, and unshakable. With gratitude comes peace, the kind of peace that does not depend on circumstances. You see, childhood wounds often keep people restless. They are always searching for approval, searching for love, searching for a sense of belonging. But when God heals you, that searching begins to quiet down. You realize you already have what you once thought you lacked. You realize that you are loved, seen, and worthy, not because of anything you achieved, but simply because you exist. That realization is the foundation of peace, and this peace is different from momentary relief. It is not the peace of distraction or escape. It is the peace that lives inside you, even when life around you is uncertain. It is the peace that lets you rest at night without replaying the past. It is the peace that lets you stand firm when criticism comes, because you know it does not define you. This kind of peace is priceless, and it is the fruit of God's healing touch. As peace settles in, something else awakens: fulfillment. You begin to live with a sense of purpose that goes beyond survival. For so long, childhood pain may have forced you to live in survival mode, just trying to make it through the day, carrying the weight of old memories. But now with healing, you step into a new way of living. You are no longer just surviving, you are thriving. This thriving shows up in small ways first. You notice joy in simple moments: sunlight on your face, laughter with a friend, silence without fear. You begin to savor life instead of rushing through it. And as this joy grows, you feel more aligned with who you were always meant to be. You begin to pursue dreams you once abandoned. You open yourself to opportunities you once feared. You dare to live boldly because the chains that once held you back are gone. And perhaps the most powerful fruit of this new life is the ability to give back. Gratitude, peace, and fulfillment naturally flow outward. You find yourself encouraging others without even trying. Your presence itself becomes healing. People feel safe around you because you carry safety within yourself. You become a living testimony that wounds can heal, scars can transform, and life can be beautiful again. This is the beauty of God's healing. It doesn't just restore what was lost, it multiplies it. You end up with more wisdom, more peace, more love than you ever imagined possible. The pain that once threatened to destroy you becomes the very reason you shine brighter. So if you are listening right now, take this as an invitation to step into gratitude. Even if you are still in the middle of your healing process, begin by thanking God for how far you have already come. Gratitude is not just the result of healing, it is also the pathway to deeper healing. The more you practice gratitude, the more you open your heart to receive peace and fulfillment. And remember, healing is not just about you. Every time you take a step toward peace, you ripple that peace into the lives of those around you. Your family feels it, your friends feel it, the world feels it. Healing is contagious, and your story has the power to inspire countless others. Before we continue, let me remind you once more: don't keep this journey to yourself. Subscribe, share this message, and comment below what resonated with you the most. You never know whose life you might touch simply by engaging with this message. Together we create a community of healing, hope, and transformation. The journey of healing childhood wounds is not just about recovery, it is about rebirth. When God heals you, He does not simply return you to who you were before the pain. He transforms you into someone stronger, deeper, and more whole than you ever imagined. This is why your healing becomes a testimony. Your life itself begins to speak. Even without telling your story, people can sense it. They notice the peace in your eyes, the calm in your presence, the dignity in the way you carry yourself. And if you choose to share your story, it becomes a beacon of hope. Someone listening may recognize themselves in your words and realize they too can heal. That is the power of testimony. It multiplies healing across lives. Your new identity is no longer tied to what happened in your childhood. You are no longer the rejected child, the silenced child, the forgotten child. You are the healed adult, the restored soul, the living example of resilience. And from this place you carry a new authority, not the authority of control or dominance, but the authority of experience. People listen to those who have walked through the fire and come out with light. God's healing gives you a new sense of belonging. You realize you were never truly abandoned, never truly invisible. Even in your darkest moments, you are being shaped for something greater. This realization anchors you in a new identity, chosen, valued, and loved. And once you embrace that identity, you stop chasing what the world cannot give you. You rest in the truth of who you are. The beautiful thing is that healing never stops with you. As you continue walking in your new identity, you naturally extend healing to others. Your words carry comfort, your presence carries safety, and your life carries hope. You become a reminder that no wound is too deep for God to heal, no past too broken to be restored, no story too dark to shine with light. And so the wounds of your childhood, once a source of pain, become the very foundation of your calling. They are no longer chains that hold you down, but wings that lift you higher. Your scars are no longer signs of weakness. They are signs of survival, strength, and transformation. And every day you live in this truth, you are rewriting the meaning of your past. So as we close this journey together, I want you to remember this. Your story is not defined by what happened to you. It is defined by what you choose to do with it now. Healing is not a one-time event. It is a daily choice to live in freedom, gratitude, and peace. Every day you wake up and choose healing, you step further into the person you were always meant to be. If you are here today listening to these words, it is not by coincidence. This message reached you because healing is calling your name. God is inviting you to let go of the weight of your childhood wounds and step into the freedom of your true identity. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not forgotten. You are not unworthy. You are a masterpiece in progress, and your best chapters are still being written. So I encourage you, hold on to hope, embrace your healing, and never forget that your life is living proof that wounds can become wisdom, scars can become strength, and brokenness can become beauty. And now, let me ask you one last time. If this message has spoken to your soul, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and comment below what part touched you the most. Your engagement is not just support. It is part of the healing journey we are building together. Because healing grows in community, and together we are stronger.